Okay, effort 3 after my laptop decided to die for a third time. Finishing off that point I was just making, when Shakespeare mentioned Macbeth early on, the audience would be... can I focus up a little bit? The audience would know the conventions of tragedy. Conventions means the expectations. They would kind of know how the story is going to go. Just when you watch, like a sitcom, or episode of How I Met Your Mother, or an episode of a series, every episode tends to follow the same formula. Of main character, something happens to them, there's a problem, solve it with their friends, they resolve it, everything's sort of sorted out, little cliffhanger to the next one up. So subtly the expectations and the conventions of stuff that you regularly watch, and the audience would be kind of aware of that watching these now. Okay, so they would kind of know that Macbeth would be the person who would start off very respected and well, and due to a fatal flaw and his hubris would have his downfall and cause lots of chaos, but that by the end order would be restored. Okay. So let's just skim through a couple of things from the end before we look at form and structure a bit more deeply, okay, and explain a more difficult concept. So you've got Grey Malkin and Paddock. Now these are the familiars, okay, the sort of creepy little magical pets that witches had. And equally, when it mentions hover through here, we can kind of assume that would be them flying, which again people at the time believed witches could do. Okay, right, now we're going to talk about meter. Okay, so pay attention for this bit. This can be tricky. I advise perhaps rewinding this section and listening again if you don't get it on the first go round. Okay, so meter, okay, like this, is in simple terms, okay, which is the only way you need to understand it, how syllables, sounds in a word, are emphasized as they're spoken. Now, I'm probably going to touch on a couple of things that you've studied in year 9, but it's worth going back over it and just having a look and a refresher on some of the terminology. Again, because using some of this specialist subject terminology is a really good way to hit a couple of criteria on the mark scheme, and again, set you apart and improve your academic writing style. All right. So the meter is just how syllables in a word are emphasized as they're spoken. Now Shakespeare uses different meters to show things about different types of characters. So diff meters equals diff character types. Okay. So a little bit like with your measuring distance, okay, in English literature, meter is made up of feet, okay, or a singular foot, I suppose. Now, the witches, okay, in this play, talk very differently to noble characters, and they both talk differently to commoners. Okay, so in broad strokes, you could say there's those three types of characters in this play. So witches, nobles, and that includes Macbeth, Banquo, Macduff, King Duncan, Lady Macbeth, and us, commoners. All right, and each of them has a different meter, a different way of emphasizing the syllables in words as they're spoken. If that sounds a bit weird, that's because it is, but all will become clear. Okay, so the main way Shakespeare writes for the bulk of his writing is in a meter called iambic pentameter, and it doesn't rhyme, and overall this is commonly called blank verse. So that is the name of that and that together. Okay, so we can break down these words to actually figure out what it means, and I wouldn't be surprised if you start to figure out how you could name different meters in a moment. So an iamb on its own is the type of foot, right? Now an iamb would be represented with this notation. Okay, so we might say this means unstressed and this means stressed. Okay, pentameter, so penta means 5. Think about a pentagram in your maths if you're doing geometry. And meter, as we've just talked about, just means how syllables are emphasized as they're spoken. So penta is 5. Right? So there are 5 of these pairs of unstressed and stressed syllables in each line of a noble speaking. So that times 5 equals 10 syllables. Now this has a few effects, okay? It sort of gives a regular beat and rhythm that sounds quite noble, is easy to remember, can be used with lots of emphasis and inflection, okay? So strong rhythm, okay? People sometimes mention about a heartbeat kind of illusion, easier to remember. Okay, but this is the main thing when we talk about the strong rhythm. Okay, these are sort of smaller side points. Now this is supposed to be the noble way. Okay, so just like we might talk about accents or how people use different language, and it as a sort of indicator of class or how well educated you are or how wealthy you are, Shakespeare is indicating to us straight away that people talking blank verse are noble. Okay. They're of a higher status. Commoners don't even speak in poetry. They speak in prose, which when you read a novel, you read it in prose. So just full, normal sentences. Almost as if they're sort of too stupid to appreciate or understand the high art and the poetry and the skill of Shakespeare's writing. Okay. There are only a few of these in the play, or in any of Shakespeare's tragedies, and they tend to be used to make rude or lewd sexual jokes, which were usually and partly to appeal to the common people we were watching, right? Some of the vocabulary and ideas would go over the heads of common people who didn't have the benefit of education that lots of people have now. But since time immemorial, people have got sex jokes, okay? And that's kind of what they were aimed at, as a sort of light interlude, a light break from the rest of the heavy-going play stuff, okay? So again, it's a class indicator, even there. Now, for the witches. So this is setting up what we're doing with the witches. So I wonder if you can figure out, as I'm talking, what the type of meter the witches speak